Hi there, and welcome to another one of my classic reviews where I'm going to take one of my all-time favourite movies, give it a rewatch and then review it. And this video I'm going to be talking about Inherent Vice. Inherent Vice is a 2014 film by master director Paul Thomas Anderson. And Paul Thomas Anderson has built quite a reputation in the past 2 decades with his many films, mostly historical films, all about capturing a certain specific time and place and capturing a tone. And he's proven himself to be the master of tonal change and a master of films that just have a vibe. And Inherent Vice is perhaps one of his most vibe-centric films. The story is based on a Thomas Pynchon novel and basically follows a private investigator in 1970 who's a hippie called Doc. And Doc gets 3 cases. One is from his ex-girlfriend who's in a relationship with a real estate mogul whose wife is going to put him into a mental asylum. The second is from a woman who thinks her husband's dead but thinks he might also be alive. And the third one is from the Black Panthers who want to get money back from some neo-Nazis. And these 3 sort of cases then all intertwine. Pynchon is not known for being a writer of simple stories. He is deliberately postmodern. Inherent Vice is a film which is designed to not be understood. In fact, I've seen the film maybe 5 times and I only kind of now know what the plot is. Every time I watch the film I always discover a new part of the story or a new character motivation or a new plot line that I didn't really realise was there. It's so dense. Like every single scene is so dense with plot that after a while that's kind of the genius of the film, because after a while you realise the plot is so irrelevant and actually you start focusing on other stuff because you can't focus on the plot because you can't understand it, and that's the point. But then the other thing is maybe it's not about any of them at all. I mean sure, it touches on drugs and paranoia and Mansonites and anti-communism and brainwashing and all these other things, but maybe it's not about any of them at all. Maybe the film is actually not about cults, despite the fact that cults are brought up frequently into the plotline. Maybe it's not about hippies, maybe it's not about law enforcement. Could be about none of those things. The film could also be going totally for the vibe that it gives. I mean, this is a film with such a specific vibe and energy. It has a wonderful score, a wonderful soundtrack, and it has just this really sort of unique specificity. It really feels like it's showing you the energy of the time. It also has this wonderful sense of place where it doesn't ever feel fake, even though it's increasingly absurd. It's knowingly ridiculous and knowingly incomprehensible, and so it ultimately becomes a film you have to just ignore. You have to just move on and just accept the kind of drugged vibe of the project. The film is trying to be kind of druggy and not understandable and out there, and that's kind of what the film becomes. And then there's all the comedy. It's really funny as well. A recurring gag involving a police inspector eating a frozen banana and at one point gagging on it is quite funny, even though it's seemingly quite crude. And that's kind of another thing. It's not a movie that is afraid to be lowbrow and crude, but it's also a film with a very intelligent requirement. You do need to be able to keep up on some level, but you also need to be aware that, you know, it's not a film to watch with total ease. It's a film that's difficult to find sometimes a way into in parts. I mean, Inherent Vice has a ridiculously large cast, which just shows how many characters there are. I mean, the main cast maybe consists of Joaquin Phoenix, Owen Wilson, Josh Brolin, Catherine Waterston, Jenna Malone, Reese Witherspoon, Benicio del Toro, Hong Chow, Martin Short, Joanna Newsom, Eric Roberts, Maya Rudolph. So it has a large amount of characters and they all sort of go through maybe not even like character arcs. Like there's a kind of a romance vibe which plays off and there's kind of a love story part of it, but the whole detective side of it is just really dense. And I think that's interesting. I think what's interesting about Inherent Vice is that you're meant to go in and kind of just bathe in the vibe. You're meant to just kind of take it in and just relax. Because one thing that Inherent Vice absolutely is so enjoyable. It's really just fun in a lot of ways. The comedy works so well and the drama becomes so irrelevant because the drama itself is so incomprehensible and so dense in ways that you can kind of move on from that. I mean, there's a couple of things you can really latch onto if you want to analyse. I think there's definitely a very interesting comparison to maybe between the 2 leads, Doc and Bigfoot. I mean, they seem to become more like each other as the film goes on. Maybe Doc becomes more like Bigfoot or Bigfoot more like Doc. I mean, they certainly reach a point where they repeat each other's words, so maybe they're the same or partners. It might even be something totally inane. And then you have just random deep sections that might not be deep at all. I mean, there's a photograph that's taken that looks like The Last Supper, the famous painting. And then there's also stuff to do with Bigfoot being an actor. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff to do with actors and communism. And maybe that all comes to something, but it might not. And maybe that's the point. Maybe you're meant to go into the film and not really know what's going on. Sort of film which I imagine if you don't get, you should try watching on drugs or when drunk. Because I think you're meant to at least appreciate the film on some rather drugged up level. It's meant to be a film that you sort of just go far out with and just experience. It's a film about the experience more than it's about the substance. And that's not to say there's no substance, but the substance might ultimately reduce down to there's meant to be no substance, which in itself I guess is substance, which might be the ultimate postmodern irony, because then this is a postmodern work based on the most postmodern author I can think of. But that's kind of beside the point. My point is, this is fantastic filmmaking because it's so enjoyable. And not only is it enjoyable, it's enjoyable in a way that is unlike anything else. Very few films are as deliberately dense as this, and those that are as dense as this tend to at least attempt to be some other kind of thing. This is trying to be as dense as it is, but also be funny and also be witty and also be amusing. It's a film that never lets up. It's a film that's really, really fun. It's so rewatchable as well. Partially because it's really complicated, but also because the jokes last and the humour remains forever and the whole vibe just never goes away. It's a film that I listen to the soundtrack over and over again. I just love the feeling of it. Paul Thomas Anderson has never made a single movie I wouldn't classify as any less than great, unless we're counting that documentary Junon, which was a bit of a boring mess. Generally speaking, Inherent Vice is fantastic. It is super enjoyable, it's super dense, it's super fascinating, it's deep, but might not be deep. It's kind of quirky, it's very quirky, it's out there, it's different, it has a totally sort of unique style. It's the only Pynchon adaptation that's yet been made, because Pynchon is a notoriously unadaptable author. It's wonderful, and I think Inherent Vice just holds up to scrutiny time and time again. It's certainly a film that I think is very easy to watch, provided you're in the right state of mind. Thanks for watching. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on Inherent Vice, so please leave a comment. If you like this video, give it a like, and please subscribe if you want to keep up to date with all my reviews. If you want to find out what I'm watching early, you can follow me on Letterboxd or Twitter, links in the description. And once again, thank you for watching.